Good day, everyone. I'm going to set my timer right now for 90 minutes. After that 90 minutes is up, what I would like you to do is take a 15-minute break, go to the restroom, drink water, pet your dog, get a snack, say hi to the family, and then before you come back, go ahead and email me about any questions you have about this first portion that we get to on part A. I'll be stopping right around the 90-minute marker, like you normally would in an in-person training. About every hour and a half, you get a break for 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll continue. And you're going to have a chance anytime that you purchase this training for elementary and or secondary. There's a special deal going in October if you take advantage of it, where if you already purchased it, you will get the secondary training for free, or you can get two elementary trainings. But the more important, I'm willing to send both to you for that price. But what is a cool advantage is that you will get a class set of the graphic organizers that have on one side reading and revising. That's why it's called readvising. On the bottom portion, it has the ARM graphic organizer for adding, removing, replacing, and moving content. So revising is improving the content, reading is understanding the content, and on the inside will be a train you how the structure of informative expository, opinion argumentative, and correspondence for secondary would look like. So you'll get 6 points, 3 points from each grader in terms of how it's organized, maybe going across each train, and then uh, as developed in terms of quantity of details for each section. So basically, if you're used to maps, it's kind of a flow map if you think of left to right here, and a tree map top to bottom. If you've ever worked with the thinking maps, it's color coded mainly for the traffic lights, but some prompts need a second box for a second piece of evidence or a second idea that's going to be shared. And sometimes we need three or even four. And so I have all sets of those ready for you to be able to handle it. So that's the structure in it's more, think of it not like trains if you're middle school or high school. Think of it like four boxes. What's going to be in the red introduction box, the blue and green body box, and the red conclusion box. And then when you're done with your essay, and we'll talk about this more in detail because of this video, you'll be taking your paper to the editing room of capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling, and sentence boundaries. We'll also be talking about PKL. How is your penmanship, your print, if you're writing with pencil or pen, cursive, same way, or K keyboarding, and all keyboarding is looks like print, and then the L is letters. A lot of times when people see this, they think it's pre-K level, but it's only penmanship, print, cursive, keyboarding, and letters. And so if your students are on a peak pre-K level in those things, you better come down the ladder and not work on advanced skills if your kids can't even handle those. Okay. So the other thing that you're going to get is a set of the folders. This is the main portion of it. These are called the reading and writing guides. So you can either get with, you're basically going to be getting a buy one, get one free. So you'll be getting a hard copy of these that have the figurative language and dialogue examples on the bottom. And on the opposite side, the back, it'll be a little mini thesaurus in color. You've already received, if you ordered this, you've already received the digital copies. Let me know if you have not received them yet. Sometimes things get blocked. So what I highly recommend you do is email me the second that you make a purchase. And the same goes for anybody else. As soon as you finish your purchase, when you're checking out of the store, regardless of which method you're using, go ahead and take time to email me. That way, it reduces the chances of you getting blocked as junk mail spam. I don't want you thinking that I'm not sending you the materials. I won't be sending you every single video, but I will be sending just you teachers who sign up for the training, the buy one, get one free for October, and then regular price after that. You will be getting all of the materials that you see me use. And I'm constantly adding materials. I have almost 700 pages in a Dear Doc daily editing and revising development organization conventions binder. Uh, and I have that in English, almost 700 pages, and a couple of hundred pages in Spanish, because I do have to try and help those who are struggling in Spanish. Get with me if you have some friends that need some guidance in the Spanish. It won't be like a full-fledged training, but I can help with different aspects and post videos and things for them without having to buy what they can probably buy as just uh, the materials in Spanish, and I will give them the guidance here on uh, TikTok, YouTube, or Facebook at no additional charge. So a couple of things you're going to need. I call it lab work because we're doctors. Doc is what Bugs Bunny says, development, organization, and conventions. And so on test day, your students have to be their own doctor, and they have to develop, organize, and have good conventions. And so what's allowed in the test, which I want you to have now, is lab work, lined and blank paper, so that you can take notes, and also if you can stop the video for a second and find yourself a red, yellow highlighter, green marker, colored pencil, crayon, and a pencil or pen, whichever you prefer to write with, um, so that you can take notes. I do want to say that all of the things that we're going to be writing on, I tried my best to set it up where there's one page. So if you end up printing them out, you can go ahead and use one to print on and practice and follow along as I'm sharing. Some of the pages are pre-written for you, and some are uh, going to be filled in with you so you can watch me as we go. Okay. So the first thing I want to ask you or tell you basically is this, that one of the things that many teachers have told me, and I'm not sure why it happened the first 2 years with a lot of kids, and this past year, not quite so many. Some of the students didn't even know where in the test, where in the test that the extended constructed response was at. So I want to share that with you right now. Okay. And I think it's important enough to show you that. And I'm going to make sure that you can see the documents very clearly. So I'm going to each time, I'm going to just switch back and forth from my facial camera to my document camera. So here we go. For third grade, there are going to be 24 questions in reading, and you're going to notice that for third grade, the 25th point was a multi-select 2-point question. So let me show you that over here on the reading and writing guides, multi-select. What that means is there's more than one correct answer to a question. So that's going to be third grade. And the other 2-point question was number 14. It was the answer evidence, and I have that up here, short constructed answer evidence. So third grade received one of those. If I switch over, and this is in your uh, Reading Language Arts resources page from TEA. Okay, so then you look at it, 24 questions plus the 2 questions that are worth 2 points, that's 26. So the writing points are 26 points and the reading are 26. Again, 24 points plus the 2-point questions, extra point each would be 26. And then the essay for third, fourth, and fifth was question number 25. It was basically transitioning from reading into the writing portion of the test. All right. Unfortunately, revising editing to me seems to be the easiest, but you can see here I've been breaking down the test like crazy in percentages. What I want you to notice is that except for the extended constructed response, all of the revising editing questions are worth only 1 point. There is one short constructed response for revising, and I've been going over that with you. Right now, we're on 7th grade out of 10th. I will be finished with 10th grade this weekend, and we'll be sending you a practice test just of that skill. And then next month, we're going to be going to lots of editing and revising. Again, giving you a practice test once we're finished and at the end of October, revising after that. We'll get a practice test at the end of November, etc. Just follow that timeline. So let's see if they did the same thing for fourth grade. There's the 2-point. The very second question was a short constructed response. So fourth grade, they got one of those where the answer how do you get a 1? Give the evidence or the answer response. How to get the 2? Give the evidence and the response. And I'll let you look at the guidelines because there's a lot of confusion, unfortunately, about that. That is not accurate. So I want you to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of what is expected of your students. So there's another 2 there. Number 20 is also multi-select. So I'll mark that on the reading and writing guide. Whoops, I put it in the wrong place. Be careful. So far, both grade levels received 1 multi-select where there was more than 1 correct answer and 1 short constructed 2-point response. And just like the open-ended essays, these I do want to share text entry, a short constructed response for revising every single grade level had to enter their best shot, third, fourth, fifth, and even all the other grade levels if you're watching this, because training is being offered to all grade levels. So again, question 25 started the essay for fourth grade. And then there were nothing but 1 point questions for revising, followed by editing. Last one to make sure that this is consistent. Again, the second question for fifth grade was the short constructed response, which was the 2 point answer evidence question. Okay. If it was one of the other ones, if you look at this red line right here, every single item of these 7 that are above the red line are question types that you can get on a reading and writing test. They don't often give them, but they are there. So as you can see, all grade levels, third, fourth, and fifth, got 2 points, 2 point opportunities for the answer evidence type questions. And let's see what the other 2-pointer was. There it is down there. Again, it was multi-select. So for third, fourth, and fifth grade. So if you were to laminate this, your student can check off what kind of question that this is with their dry erase or wet erase markers, and then they can be shared across the grade level if you have more than one class, or like I said, if you want to buy a training for yourself and somebody else, you can get 2 sets of these class setup folders, hard copies, nice and colorful. They're going to be in 11 by 17 sizes. The other thing I want to show you is to make sure that it's still question 25. Yes, the 10 points, we're leaving reading and heading into writing with the essay. So basically, it's the last question of the reading questions. And the good thing about that is if you make sure your kids do all of those other questions first in that passage, or in third and fourth grade, it was 2 passages, and I'm not sure. I believe that both third and fourth grade, the paired passages were uh, right before the extended constructed response, because the prompt for both third and fourth grade this past year was a paired passage. One for third grade was informative expository, and fourth grade was in opinion argumentative. Fifth grade went back to informative expository. All right. So as you see, the rest of the test is revising 1-point questions. And you can see here another SCR question. A short constructed response is always like a box response. Only 56% did well in that one. In fourth grade, the short constructed response, 1 point, 57% that one. And in the third grade, revising, third grade revising number, there it is, number 30, 52%. Okay. All right. So the reason I said all that was to make sure that your students know that they are not going to see the prompt until out until question number 25 in elementary on the test. Okay. So my high suggestion for you is once they've done all of the regular reading multiple choice questions that will be from the paired passages, basically a couple questions about one passage only, a couple from the other passage, and a couple about both passages together. And what you can see that I did for you is I went ahead and pre-highlighted to save a little bit of time today. Um, and I left one blank. That way, if you decide to use this with your students, you can. Please do not expect high scores in October, because August, September, October, we're only 3 months into the year. So if you want to get 90%, it's a progress, it's a process, it's not magic. So in August, we might have only had 10% doing well. In September, 20%. And by the end of October, we'll hopefully be at 30%, either showing growth or um, approaches, meets, or masters. And then each month try to gain about 10%. So what I suggest that your students do is make sure they do all the reading questions first. And here's the prompt page. That's what it's going to look like. And a lot of kids were telling their teachers that first year and the second year, they didn't even know that they were on the prompt. So I want to make sure if your kids don't know that they're on the page where the prompt for an extended constructor response is, that's a problem. So I'm going to go to the second page, and here's where you can either take notes on the second page of the document that I gave, or you can write on lined paper or blank paper. Okay, so I've already talked about it. It's question number 25. 26 points will be for writing. And a lot of times kids did not know where it was. So I'm going to make you take a notice of a couple of things that are going to help your students. The first thing I see here is a bunch of bullets. 5 on how to get a 5, 4 on the steps that you do for pre-writing, post-writing, and on writing, pre, during, and post. And so that's 9 bullets. And there'll be a 10th bullet, which is going to be what they'll be explaining. So here's an issue that I noticed. It's not always going to say explain, but I do want to say one of the first steps that your kids can do is say, okay, I'm going to look for the bullets. Okay. There is 9 bullets, but if your kids look for one of these 3 words, they'll know what to do. The do is development and organization. A homophone for do is when there's moisture on the ground. Your kids on the ground level are going to have some problems if they don't look for one of these 3 words. So let me take you through the third year prompt, the third grade, and see what the word said that was the first word of the task. Third grade, explain. E. Fourth grade, explain. E. Even though there were 2 different purposes of writing there, one was informative expository, the other was opinion argumentative, they still had to explain. Okay, so let's keep going. Hopefully, all of elementary will have it simple, and they did. Explain. So the first thing, your kids are either going to get the word explain or a couple of other words that we're going to look at here in just a moment. Sixth grade, they made it hard to find the prompt. I had to look around for it. It doesn't say explain, but it does say the purpose of writing here. If they did it properly, some of the grade levels didn't, unfortunately. So there is the prompt there, write. Okay, so write, whoops, I meant to put grade levels here. Third, fourth, and fifth grade all had explain. Sixth grade told your students to write, even though they still have to explain because the bullets are the same that explain why they chose their ideas. Seventh grade, describe how the relationship between the author and the grandmother influenced. So even though it does say describe, your students will have to describe the idea, the relationship between two, similar to the fourth grade prompt about two characters and how because these two characters were together, we would be using the little graphic organizer about these two, the author and the grandmother, on one passage. Okay, so describe, that was grade 7. So they won't know what to do until they write do, which is remind them it's what the ground, it's like the ground level. What do I need to do? DEW. Grade 8. Explain. Grade 9. Explain. And English 1, grade 9. English 2, grade 10. For students who didn't pass the grade 10, English 2 also says explain. So in most of the cases, it did say explain, but it did also say do. So we have look for the bullets, and we can make a 10th one, 10th bullet on either describe, explain, or write. That way they know what to do. Okay, well, what will they be doing? What will they do? The next thing that you might tell them to do, and this little acronym that I'll be making is inside your folder, inside your reading and writing guide in the uh, essay portion of the binder. We have to then, where the prompt is written, we're going to do something called separate. Okay, I'm going to write down bullets so you don't forget. We're going to separate what? We're going to separate the topic. And so that's what I've done for you for the one that we're going to work on today. Part A, how to get from 5 to 7. Part B, how to get from 8 to 10. So we separated it. And why is that important? Because if students are not on the sentence level, you have to take them to the word and phrase level and help them to break apart the prompt. So we're going to separate the topic into That's what I did for you. Either easy or at least easier, easier sections. And if your kids are not having any trouble finding the prompt and knowing where the prompt is and what to do, DODEW, then you don't have to worry about this. But I'm saying it because the scores are so freaking low for the third year in a row that we've got to do something differently than what we're doing. Okay. So explain, describe, or write will be the first separation. Normally, it'll be a who, a what, a when, a where, a why, a which. That's going to be the idea, where the idea is going to come from, because they don't tell you how. They're going to ask you how based on, as what you can see here, evidence. Okay. So this prompt that you see in the box, I wish they would do that and just have only that in the box for every grade level. But as you saw, that did not happen. Another word for prompt is topic. Okay. As soon as you finish reading the topic, you're going to see that it has to be based on evidence. And what I was explaining in a video yesterday was too many people are going straight from the topic to coming up with the idea. Well, look what's above the idea. It says evidence. So first focus on the topic, then start looking at evidence that responds to that. Okay. And so responds to what? How the idea, they'll come up with the histories of sneakers and pants. Two things. That means you're going to probably have to come up with two ideas because they're talking about two subjects here. So I made a little stick man. We've got to art. This one essay has to be focused on sneakers and pants, and then how are they similar to one another. So when I look back at my writing folder, your kids have to get used to this. The third grade prompt, which was similar to this one, said, how are the farmer's goals in the story, who, the farmer, different than Olivia's goal in playing soccer? The one I'm doing now is two W's. The first W is going to be sneakers, similar to pants. They didn't just say sneakers and pants, they said, how are they similar to each other? Now, here's something that I noticed, even though it says that for third, fourth, and fifth grade, that you only need to get evidence from one selection to guarantee like a two or a three. It does say in this sentence on your prompt page, be sure to use specific evidence from the articles. It'll say both articles, both stories, both selections. Okay. And it will say up here, based on the details in both selections. So we can't pick one or the other like we were always doing before. There'll be some situations where you only have to present one side or the other, but for the first time this year, and I feel like it wasn't fair, but I felt like I needed to address how to do that because if you weren't aware and I didn't already tell you, if you didn't see it on my Facebook post, my TikTok post, 52% of the third graders in Texas got 4 zeros in how something's organized, developed, and conventions. Once you get the 4 zeros in organization, 2 zeros in organization conventions from the 2 different graders, you're automatically going to receive a 0 in conventions from those same 2 different readers because they don't want to give you conventions points on things that are either completely off topic or they're missing the head, the central idea. Okay. So that means once I understand the topic, once I start looking through evidence, which is what we'll do, then I can come up with my answer, which will be my idea. And yeah, I don't really care. You can restate the prompt if you want to. The histories of sneakers and pants are similar to one another in a way that blah, 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 blah. That's the how part. So you can restate, you can rephrase, you can reflect, but be sure that you do not start by restating the prompt and then answering it. Because if all you're looking at is the prompt, then you're trying to answer it. You're skipping this step, this E step in the process. So as you look here, this first bullet is a combination of answering and possibly be restating or rephrasing something. Okay, so let's take these. I drew a little hand because this is basically the student rubric on test day. They have no earthly idea what your students were being taught um, by you or by the curriculums, the programs you use, the acronyms that you're required to teach. So here's what I recommend that you do that's really, 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 if you don't remember anything, remember this part right here. It says clearly state your central idea. Middle school, it might say clearly state your controlling idea. High school, it might say clearly state your thesis. It's all an idea. You clearly state your claim or your opinion, clearly state your argument. In Spanish, it'll say clearly state your postura. So they've got to look for one of those three. Are they going to ask me for a central idea, a controlling idea, a thesis, a claim, an opinion, an argument, a postura? Okay. So first thing that they said was clearly state your idea. The second bullet said organize your writing. So I'm just going to make an O for organize. The best idea is if this head is the first part of my body, then the idea can be the first part of the essay, what we're going to call the introduction. Okay. Then the next bullet says to develop your ideas. So I'm going to make a D here. Develop your ideas in detail. And so the cool thing about that is I have an introduction now, and I have developing and detail. That's going to be my body. What's supposed to happen in the body? Well, let's find out. The development part is going to be your students explaining. And I kind of broke it down there, but I want you to see it one by one down here below. So clearly state your idea, whatever it might be, organize your essay, develop in detail. Then it says use evidence from the selection in your response. That's the third time they've asked us to make sure that the evidence is there. So the idea will be in the introduction, most likely. In the body, we'll be developing our ideas in detail by taking evidence that we're going to explain. Then there's only one more bullet, but we still haven't finished the essay. So here's the cool thing about that. It says use correct spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and grammar. Well, that's called the conclusion. No, that's called conventions. So I'm going to put conventions, and all of a sudden we have an I, a B, and a C based on what's actually written in the student rubric. So your students have to remember, even though it's not written, part of the organization of an essay is it has to have an opening, a body, and a conclusion, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So make sure there's a conclusion, a closing, or a close of some kind. Then you can work on the conventions like the last essay says. The last bullet says, sorry. All right. So all of how you do this first part is worth 3 points from one grader. How strong you are in this second part is worth the other 2 points. You'll get 0, 1, or 2 for conventions, 0, 1, 2, or 3 for organization and development, for a total of 5 points from each grader. So I hope that that is helpful. Please look at this page, and I want you to reflect for a minute. Make a little star or an asterisk or something. What did you feel? This is a lot of information that I shared on one page, and this is basically teaching your students to dissect the prompt, because we don't want zeros just because we don't understand what to do, D-O, and do, D-E-W. So we broke down the prompt using besties. We read the bullets and used them to make IBC and everything that hopefully will happen to get the basic structure, because all we're trying to do on this part A is have enough content organized and slightly developed so that I can get a total of 5 from 2 different readers. And so my goal will be this. I'm hoping that this is going to happen, that I can show you how to get students to get a 2 in organization and development from each grader. And because we're at the beginning of the year, a realistic goal would be to get a 1 in conventions. That would be 3 points. And again, this is what we're striving for. This is not an October goal, because some of your kids are in what I call zero land on all of these, or la la land. And then a second grader in April are going to take these struggling students that we've worked so hard with, and they're going to see some organization development that will make them want to give a 2. And hopefully the conventions will be able to go from a 0 to a 1 by the testing date, which would give them a total of 3. And I had said that my goal for part A is to try and get students to earn 5, 6, or 7 points. The reason I put 5 and 7 is because writing is subjective. Some graders are not going to give the 2 points on organization development. They might give an extra point on conventions. They might not. And so with this general idea in mind, that's how your students would get either 5, 6, or 7 points. So let me show you what I would do. I'm going to use something that I haven't used with you yet. I'm going to show you in a fast forward version the first selection. Now that we know how they were similar, what you might have to do with your students is have them do what some of you call hashtag, where they're going to highlight important information from each paragraph or stanza or passage. Let me show you what I'm saying here. They're going to look at the evidence because that's what I said, that we need to go straight from the topic to evidence. And we're going to look for examples of evidence from the text. And it can either be in quotations or it can be paraphrased. So we can ask first, where is the evidence that we're going to use, whether we paraphrase it or cite it with examples? Is that on a certain line or lines, scene, scenes, stanza or stanzas, certain sentence or sentences, section, sections, or paragraph, paragraphs? Okay. So depending on, if you just say in the passage, that's a little bit too vague. So you might want to get a little bit GPS, get pretty specific, not only on the explanation that you're going to do, but at least tell the reader where the evidence is. That way it's easier for the computer, hopefully, to differentiate between evidence and the explanation. Okay. So those are the ones I highlighted. So I'm just going to read you the highlighted portions because as I read through it, I was thinking, okay, looking for things that were similar, but I've got to look for the highlights of each paragraph. And your students can highlight. So part of the rules of doing anything reading and writing, I'm going to put rules here, is we needed to read the prompt. That way we can read the selection, and in this case, selections. We're going to try and understand what we're supposed to do, D-O and D-E-W. We're going to label in both places by highlighting because the computer has the highlighting option. Then we'll be execute our plan, not exa ugly. Um, And a lot of you believe in brainstorming, planning, and a rough draft. A lot of kids won't do that. So what they'll have to do is they'll have to write their final copy. Then they can go back and then rewind and backspace over some things. So once they execute their plan, they will write their essay. Then they will search for any errors before they turn it in and then submit the response. Okay, so let's kind of see. This one was about Sneaker Nation. It does say read the article Sneaker Nation and the article Jeans Take Over. So the first one apparently is something you wear on your feet, and this is something you wear on your lower body. All right. So instead of making you read the whole thing, I'm just going to read the highlighted portions. There was a problem. Problem. Negative. Dirt running tracks across the country are being replaced with rubber ones. Why is that a problem? These spikes would ruin the rubber tracks and slow runners down. These spikes, because they were at the time using metal spikes, and I'll add that one in just for your benefit. So this guy named Bowerman, Bill Bowerman, got a creative idea. What if sneakers had a bumpy pattern on their sole like waffles. Uh-oh. I think I just adjusted my timer. Let me take it down. Time out, everybody. I don't want to go over my time. I touched my timer and changed a minute. So I'm going to have to guesstimate and say that we've done about 30 minutes so far. If I go over, I apologize for that. You can stop whenever you want and take a break whenever you want. The raised squares could grip the ground so runners wouldn't slip and um, the shoes wouldn't harm the track. And why did he say like waffles? Because he was making waffles as a running coach one day. Paragraph 2. Unfortunately, the first sneakers were expensive. And again, the question was how was the history, in other words, beginning, middle, end of sneakers and pants similar to one another. So in the beginning of the history of sneakers, they were pretty expensive. Well, and then more people started to exercise and play sports. So the law of supply and demand will kick in here. If kids are learning that in one of their classes, the more people need something, the more they're going to buy it. Um, in 1917, the first popular basketball sneakers came out called Converse All Stars because basketball had been invented. All right. Next, you got to decide on your own what do you feel is important. In 1985, another part of history later in the timeline. So that's one thing whenever they ask you about timelines, have your kids look for years and it makes it easier for them to break it down. Uh, they they made a special. I want to highlight this because I think it's important that the guy who invented the waffle tennies sneakers uh, made a special company called Nike, the most popular shoe place that's out there probably. And there was a special one he made for Michael Jordan. So they made it for a special group of people. So we're going to see how are their histories similar. If they made if they made pants for somebody special, then you could use that. If they had a problem that was solved, then we can use that. Were they expensive? Were the pants expensive first and then cheap? Then we can use that because we're looking for some idea, some part of the history that's similar to each other. The original pair of Air Jordan was around 65 bucks. Today it's going to cost you about twice that much. So 60 plus 60 is 120 and 5 is 130 because 5 is 10. All right. And so now current day. Millions of pairs of sneakers are sold each day. Pretty good. They wear sneakers with lights and wheels, some variety. You can get them in hot pink, bright orange, and any other color of the rainbow. So lots of colorful things. The total revenue is hundreds of billions of dollars of shoes sold. So those were some things that I thought were important, some highlighting. We're going to apply that to a little graphic organizer in a bit. Then there's a blank one for you to do with your students. One that I already did for you so that you didn't have to do it. You could just kind of look over. When genes take over, ah, looking for gold. Who was it? Thousands of men. Okay. The men were trudging through streams and dug into hills as they worked. Many men had a problem. Ding, ding. Problem. in the shoes, problem in the pants. They kept ripping their pants. Okay. So that you can imagine having to go through hundreds of pairs of pants, you know, uh, over a year's time because you're having to keep on fixing them or patching them up or buying new ones, which could get quite expensive. So, paragraph two, Davis came up with this idea, clever idea. He made a durable fabric called denim. Um, and basically, it was a tailor's wife that got him to do it, or he wasn't a gold miner, but he wanted to help them. So, this guy that was hired made a durable fabric called denim, and he attached some metal pins called rivets. And if you're familiar with your jeans, you'll see all those little metal rivets that he's talking about onto the pants where they most often ripped, and the idea worked. So here's a problem, here's a solution. Same thing happened with the shoes. Keep that in mind. They're still popular. So are so were sneakers. Davis talked to Levi Strauss. This is the people who sold him the denim so he could make his own pants. He asked them to work with him to make more. He just couldn't keep up uh, because they were getting very popular. Their company was called Levi Strauss, and that's what they're still called to this day. I believe Strauss is the correct pronunciation. Forgive me if it's not. So what happened after that was paragraph five. There were these Americans that were wild for cowboy movies, and the cowboys were wearing these jeans. And so were actors that we'll see here in a second. Kids begged their parents for jeans to play cowboys, and adults wore them. So the adults wanted them because they wanted to look like the movie stars they were watching, and the kids wanted them so they could look like the cowboys they were watching. Okay. Then famous people like Elvis, who's the famous person with the shoes? Michael Jordan, a famous person, similar in history. Famous people wear something, then everybody else wants to wear it. So you can see quite a few similarities so far. And what I'm going to recommend to you, because of the fact that we're talking about kids who struggle, we would probably pick the easiest one. And you've got to decide either one of these details compared to one of the other details from the first article is the easiest, or because many kids don't have endurance, they don't have the ability to read through 6 paragraphs in one, 4 paragraphs in another one, then you might have them the first time they can find something in one that they can also find in the other one, you have them use that as their evidence that they can explain. Again, that's basically a shortcut to help those kids who are just really struggling. Okay, so let's move on. Today, 95% of Americans own jeans. That means only 5%, according to this stat that came somewhere, doesn't own a pair of jeans. And I'd like to know why. It's perhaps there's certain groups of people, certain cultures, or there's certain beliefs do not allow them to wear jeans. So that kind of makes sense. And so jeans come in all sorts of styles and colors, just like we found out that sneakers come in all sorts of styles and colors. So with that in mind, I highlight, and then you'll get to see, I have this special document that I made, I think last year or the year before, where your students can basically draw quick hands on one side of a paper and quick little toes on another side, or they can just number, and basically every single thing that we highlighted, we wrote down in here, and let me work through it with you. The prompt slash topic was to explain how the histories of sneakers and pants are similar to one another. So sneakers and pants, sneakers, pants. Are sneakers persons and or people? No. Are they a place or places? No. Are they a thing or things? Yes. So we're talking about a thing and another thing, a pair of pants. And then were we just trying to decide, are they, are we comparing them, seeing how they're alike, how they're similar, how they're the same as each other? Or are we contrasting, saying how they're unlike or different from one another? Since we were asked to see how they were similar, that's what we're going to look for. So here's where your kids have to make a decision. And of course, they wouldn't need to do all of these. You might have them just do one or two, or you can say, group so and so, you guys read and see here in my notes 4 paragraphs. So you might have one group only read paragraph 1 and look for the highlight information. One group can just read paragraph 2, one paragraph 3, one paragraph 4. And when you're wanting to select the paragraph symbol on a computer, it's hold down the Alt button at the same time in your number block, the calculator part of your keyboard, 0182, if I'm not mistaken, Alt, and then 0182, and these little paragraph symbols will come out, or your kids can actually write out these paragraphs. Okay. So then we look at all these things, we're trying to figure out which one was the same. And we were talking about paragraphs. And so we're going to be using the word paragraph in our response because I think it will help. Like I said, if we can tell the location, which paragraph is it in. These are not paragraph numbers. These are just the detailed numbers that we found. We found 6 to, if you count the paragraphs, symbols, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about sneakers and pants. We found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ideas. And so all we need is 1 or 2 of these. And again, in the same way that we might have to break down the assignment at the beginning of the year, you might have one of your groups only read paragraph 1, one only reads paragraph 2. But as you see here, this one here, I just selected one key idea, one hashtag or important detail from each paragraph. And over here, we, on our little third fingerprint, we have 2 inside one paragraph. And that might happen that you might find like here, there was too much information. So I separated the 2 details from paragraph 1, that I separated the problem from the solution. So what I would recommend for students who don't have endurance, and again, I'm trying to think of kids who struggle with writing right now. And because we said that so many students got low scores, they have a hard enough time making it through one selection, let alone two. So I would probably say that the one that would be best to use is the problem and solution, because they both had a problem how they were being used. The sneakers problem and solution is here, and the pants problem and solution is here. So I can highlight those. And so what that would mean is, as soon as your kids who struggle can find something in the first one, and again, I I I'm just trying to speak from the perspective of a teacher who has worked with struggling students, in my 12 years in the classroom. And I'll just share this with you for a second. I'm gonna come back out and let you look at me for a second. In the 12 years that I was in the classroom, I went from teaching in Mission, Texas, which was a neighborhood school where 90% of the kids were being picked up by their parents and dropped off by their parents. And, there weren't as many buses as there were at Marcel Elementary as there were when I moved to PSJ. Basically, what happened was there were construction issues going on with Expressway 83, where I'm from in the valley. When you come and meet us in the valley, you're either going to come down 77 south to Expressway 83, or you'll come down Expressway 281 to Expressway 83. And that Expressway 83 that goes basically from the famous island we have called Padre, uh, all the way to, I believe it's Roma, Texas. So what was happening, what made me have to move, there was so much construction going on when they were trying to change 2 lanes to 3 lanes. I got frustrated because it was like a year and a half of driving through traffic 5 to 10 miles an hour, both directions, every single day, and accidents half the time, showing up late. So I'd have to leave so early. It was crazy, and I hated it. Um, and so here's my problem. When I went to PSJ, there were 3 issues that I think I need to make you aware of. There were 99% Hispanic students, because sometimes your population has some effect on your scores. There were 95% economically disadvantaged kids. So somebody's gonna say, well, my kids are struggling. Well, ours were struggling too. The whole reason I'm here is because we made those students do very well in writing of the what was known as tax back then. Then it was Star, and now Star 2.0, and then that weird version, whatever they're going to name that. So The other problem that happened was that area that I taught in called North San Juan. It was near what's known as Lopezville, and Lopezville was the home of the Rio Grande Valley famous Tri-City Bombers. So I had to not only deal with academic issues, we had to deal with behavior issues. So I had this one teacher, felt bad for her. My principal would group by abilities, and so based on how you did in third grade, she would put the the highest kids together, the GT group, if you want to call them that, the gifted talkers, gifted testers, gifted typers. Then she put the second group, the third group, the fourth group, and the last group based on ability. But unfortunately, she wasn't realizing that many students who struggled with academics would get to the frustration level where they would also struggle with behaving. And that wasn't something that was healthy for our teacher. And for some reason, she kept kindly volunteering to take that group. And I remember, I'm just trying to share this because I want you to see what got me to where I am today. I remember when I got there, everybody wanted to do the same thing. Basically, the popular acronym that many of you use was being used by our campus and our district. And I studied the rubric so closely, looked at all the essays, and I could tell that there were more essays that were doing well because of the fact of voice, the development in detail part. You may not have realized this, but if you look at the first two bullets, they're the idea and how it's organized, the introduction, the body, conclusion, being either present or effective. And we're just trying to get present. We're trying to get something in the head, the idea, the central idea statement about the topic. So there was a little battle between the teachers and myself that first year, and they were like, Bill, we're supposed to be all, restating the prompt exactly, and then we can go into responding to it. And I was like, I was seeing too many students starting with different ways. And for those of you who are willing to actually dig into the rubrics and the essay samples, a lot of students start in a lot of different ways. And so when I get to the second 3 hour session, you're going to notice that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And so I stuck to my guns in spite of the behavior problems I had. I remember one of my most famous ones, and my principal took me aside and me to her office and said, Bill, one of my warnings that I have to give you is one of the students who's going to be with you because he needs a male role model. He brought a loaded gun to kill his teacher. And I don't want him to be with one of the ladies because I don't want him to have to deal with that. And he's going to be with you. All I remember doing is like gulping and like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make it through this? And so that was a little bit scary for me, to say it bluntly. And she said, and his best friend, they met each other at the alternative center because that's where they spent the whole year. We don't think he's got our address, but he grabbed a chair, didn't have a weapon, so he used a chair as a weapon. And when his teacher had turned her back on him, from my understanding, he grabbed the chair. It was like one of those chair desk combinations, and he threw it at her and hit her in the head, sending her to the hospital with a concussion. And so we can probably make lots of excuses about behavior, kids not wanting to do it, population type. But I said, I had the fourth group of population. So it was the GT, the first, the second, uh, and then I was the third group uh, after the GT, and then there was the struggling kids. And so that first year, to make a long story longer, shorter, I'll try to wrap this up so we can get back on. I just wanted you to take a brain break from the tenacity of what we're doing here. The first year, our GT class received 0 4s because back then that was the highest score that you could get. Our second group got 0 4s. Our third group got 0 4. My kids were in the fourth group. Finger up there. And we had 5 students from my classroom get a 4, and the vast majority of the rest of them got 3s and 2s. And of course, everybody's always going to have a couple of kids that no matter how hard you try, you just can't seem to get through to them. So I always say, don't think of yourself as a failure because of one, think of yourself as a success because of many. And everything should not come down to a 1 day test. It frustrates me that we're teaching for 2 entire semesters to have an essay graded in 2 minutes or less by a computer or a human. And so, what happened based on those good results, my school, my colleagues, my principal, we all got together and analyzed my essays. And even though they were not doing a lot of the formulaic, rigid stuff, they were creative, they were unique, they were responding to the prompt, but in unique, different ways, which I've continued to do throughout all of tax, throughout all of star one and now star two, because of that fourth bullet that talks about the, if you read it, go to all score point threes in every single grade level, and that 1, 2, 3, 4 gets a good score. Fourth bullet, you're going to see that it says to develop effective word choices. Your sentences are going to flow from one to the next, etc. Let me take a look at my time here so I don't go over. I think I'm got about 20 or 30 minutes, and I'll let you, we'll pause and take a little break. So what happened was that all the other teachers started following suit and trying to teach writing the way that I did. And over the next several years, we ended up getting more and more 4s. And, back then, if you were been a teacher in fourth, seventh, 10th, ninth grade all this time, that those were the only grade levels that were testing. And so my principal, first of all, said, you know what, we need to start teaching writing in all of the grade levels. And so everybody had to end up writing some quantity of information by the end of the year. And, different teachers had different expectations. I always say that students are either going to raise or lower their standards to your level of expectations. So let's be those teachers who raise our standards. And so my principal started expecting more and more from the lower grades. So the pre-K, they had to respond in complete sentences with their mouths at the end of the year. They had to write words and phrases, and some kids had to write a complete sentence. They basically had differentiated instruction because of the different ability levels that were in sometimes every single class. So that foundation began to filter up to fourth grade when they got to fourth grade. And so for the next 2, 3, 4 years that I was there, we ended up getting to the point where we were getting more of the fours in our one school than all of the other 30 schools combined, which I was very proud of that. And even if they weren't getting a four, which, it was disappointing if it didn't happen, but I had lots of kids end up getting threes and twos. And, I think the big goal here is to try and not get um, zeros and ones, hopefully. We'll see. Um, anyway, that happened. And so after my fifth year there, people started asking, what are you doing? And my principal was like, well, we just kind of do what Bill McDonald teaches us. And so um, that last year in my school, I was spending 3 or 4 days working with my students and then 1 or 2 days working with other campuses from the district, and they were paying me a small fee. I had to take personal days because that's called, if you're being paid uh, your normal salary, then you're uh, getting paid extra on top of that. Uh, that's called double dipping. So what I had to do, I remember that year, was I had to take all my personal days, and then I had to lose days because um, I couldn't get paid for a day and then get paid on top of that day, if that makes sense. And so I apologize for the delay, but to make a long story short, I ended up winning campus and district teacher of the year that last year. And I was so excited and so grateful to the teachers there at the campus. Still keep in touch with some of them to this day. Some of them, I have 4 children that are now adults, and many of them were my kids' teachers. And if you happen to be watching this, I say thank you for that. And so now I've been spending the last 20 years of in tax, star one, and now star point 2.0, trying to help all teachers believe that we can take students that are struggling and getting zeros to not get zeros to one land and two land. And our second uh, 3 hours later on this afternoon, this evening, that you'll be getting this evening is going to be how to get kids that are already doing okay to uh, 8 land, 9 land, and 10 land. Okay. So let's get back to what we were doing, and I'll be able to share some more insight with you guys. Switch back to the other camera. Thank you for hearing me out. I just felt like sometimes you have to justify um, who you are and what you're doing to make it um, where people buy in and are feel like what you're sharing is worth their time, their energy, their investment. Okay. And I know that I'm not able to share with the same passion and enthusiasm. If you were sitting right in front of me, I'd be interacting with you. But in a few minutes, in about 15, 20 minutes, we're going to stop so that you guys can all um, take a break. And again, uh, please be taking notes, be thinking about some reflections that you want. Ask me some questions by email so that before I respond with the other 3 hours this evening, I will be um, looking at your questions and answering the questions that you might have. Uh, go ahead and go to my social media, Facebook mainly, in the group. Uh, put something that you felt that you enjoyed and won. Let's continue. What can we do is get a 5, 6, or 7. So again, this is a completely blank one. And again, uh, this could be written in just little boxes. You are allowed to have colors, markers, highlighters, colored pencils, line paper, blank paper. Those are all accessibility features. So I have a blank version of that so that you can help your kids understand this kind of prompts. Prompt 4 and number 5 are the very difficult ones. And that's why so many kids end up getting 0. So I'm really hoping that you're adopting some of these ideas and making them. So page 9 in your booklet, I'm going to call this 3 in 4 or 5 or more, because that's my ultimate goal with you guys after the this first 3 hour session. Uh, the prompt was the grade levels are going to be for elementary. Explain how the histories of sneakers and pants are similar to one another. Okay. The 3 means we're going to make 3 sections, an I for introduction, a B for body, and a C for conclusion. We're going to do that by dividing the paper into 4 parts, and the things that we write in there will help us to get a 5 or more. So that's basically what it's going to look like. We're not going to write all of these words in there, but I'm just going to show you how to make the basic graphic organizer that will be star aligned. So in order to write 3 things in 4 sections, we have to divide a paper into 4 sections. So there I divide it in half, and then I divide it in half again for you. And what did we say we were put in the 3 sections? If you want to, you're welcome to separate them with your pen, your pencil, or a black crayon if you happen to have all the colors. Okay. What we heard was it said clearly state your central idea. All right. So I'm going to draw an I for idea. And that idea had to be a combination of the T. So if you can see the T inside the I, the T and the idea combined to make in elementary what is called a central idea statement. In middle school, that would be called a controlling idea statement. Now, a little joke here. A lot of you have heard of that show, CSI, and unfortunately, it has nothing to do with that. Okay. It's the central idea statement. Something that I might recommend that you do is change it to CIS and only put the dot at the end. The reason for that would be once they have their idea that's central to the entire essay and a statement, also known as a sentence, ends with a period. And so hopefully we'll start it with a capital and we'll end it with a punctuation. Okay. So the reason I have these eyelashes is they look like W's. So what you can ask your kids is, what is the topic and what is the idea? Then it says to organize your essay. To organize the essay. Make a little O here. That means that this head, just like I have an eyeball inside the head, your kid will either have to write an idea or like this one, ideas, because they're asking how something is similar to something else. Okay. That was the second bullet. Organize, your essay. The third bullet said to develop your ideas in detail. So I'm going to make two D's, one in yellow and one in green. If you forgot to get your colors, you can do that anytime. So why are we doing that? Because one of them, when they say develop your ideas in detail, the development part is making sure you explain yourself. And if we have kids who struggle, we don't need them to have a million sentences. I've seen kids who even have one sentence of explaining their evidence and they end up doing okay. Okay. So the first part, there's another E that you see there. So far, we've spelled T-I-E-E. Everything in an essay has to tie together. So let's go ahead and make an E right here. We have to come up with some evidence from both texts. If they can only come up with evidence from one text, it says in the rubric they still have a chance, but because they're asking you in the prompt page, like it said on the third, fourth, let me show it to you, because it was frustrating to me, but it was in the third and fourth grade paired constables. Make sure that you see that clarity. I don't want to ever be a liar. Notice that it says, based on the details from, this is third grade, details from both selections. Use evidence from selections. So apparently, even though the rubric says you can get away with one, they technically want to use to, let's see if the fourth grade does the same thing. Based on the information in both selections. And opinion argumentative is this one. You can see that it says argumentative. We'll be doing that one next month for elementary and secondary that uses specific evidence from the selections. And so if I hold up one finger here, selection is singular. It doesn't say one or both. It wants you to use both. And selections is plural, more than one. So selection, there's one. Selections, both is two. And so I just felt like it was worth you seeing that so that you don't misunderstand the task at hand. So we're realizing that we need to give evidence. And since there are two passages, there's a couple of things to keep in mind, which you might do, and I'll show you how to do this after our break. There might have to be a sentence where you can restate or rephrase the topic, because some kids don't do well putting too many ideas together. There might be another sentence where they have their idea written out, because what they're having to do is they're having to combine, they're having to put two different ideas, how the pants passage is similar as to same to the shoe passage. Okay. With that in mind, the rubric states that we only need evidence from at least one of the selections in order to do well. In other words, what it sounds like they're saying is give us your central idea, but based on evidence, based on the evidence from both. But to be on the safe side, I did notice that the essays that did get threes from each grader in this third grade prompt about the comparing how a farmer from one passage in a story felt differently working on his goals than a character named Olivia in a poem, then I might have to find at least one sentence, one piece of evidence from the farmer's story, and one piece of evidence from a stanza in the poem to be able to use to present to you. Okay. Now, and you saw that I did it up there, so I would suggest that you do the same thing down here. If you're going to present one piece of evidence, I'm going to call that an eyeball. Here's another eyeball. What you might do for that evidence is first tell me what is the location of the evidence. Where is it? So imagine me using my eyeballs here. And then what you can do, you can say, don't forget your quotation. So basically all you did was draw a little eye. What's the location of the evidence? And if you're going to cite it exactly, you can use quotations. So kind of a neat little way to help your kids remember location, quotation. Either one piece of evidence or two. And again, because we're start talking about struggling writers, they've got to have some evidence. And as we mentioned, we have to go straight from the topic to the evidence. that we find similar so that we can come up with an idea that works for us. All right, so the explaining part, develop your ideas in detail. Even if your students can only sentence, so far we have 5 sentences, even if they only use one sentence to explain. What you might ask them to do is basically, we're going to learn them, but there are 7 W's: who, what, when, where, why, which, how. When we're trying to get the basic score, you can ask them. If they only give you evidence but they don't explain anything, then they're not really doing the body. Now, somebody asked me, is it okay to share the evidence first? Sorry, to explain it first and then give the evidence. Yes, because they're both still there. They're just in a different order. They don't really care which one your students do, as long as they're giving you evidence, hopefully in a sentence, maybe in word telling us the location of it, and in quotations. And I'll show you how to do that in our second portion of this 3 hours. Then we will use the who, what, when, where, why, which, or how when we get to our part B of the training. I'm going to be teaching you another W, and it's going to be called the wow. What's the spice, the flavor that you can add to the essay because of the 4th bullet in the organization development section. But for today, this morning at least, we're trying to only worry about getting at least a 2 in organization development, and perhaps at least a 1 because it's still beginning in the school year. And again, this is technically the end of the year goal. That last bullet was, be sure to check your essay for capitalization, punctuation, spelling, usage, and sentence boundaries. So because that's conventions, you can write that in there, but it's probably a good idea to write these words in there. What's your introduction going to be? And I'll put this word body right in between the evidence and the explaining. And then what's your conclusion? And then hopefully when they're done with their conclusion, they won't just submit and turn it in. They will take some time to work on the conventions. Okay. In a nutshell, the conventions are the editing that you do after you're done and improving the content, how it's organized and developed. That's what's known as the revising. So you'd be taking your paper to the ER, the emergency room of editing and revising. So what would that look like? More than likely, before struggling kids, we would have a sentence where we restate or rephrase the topic slightly. We would have a sentence that states the idea of how pants and jeans are similar in their histories. I would have either one sentence of evidence or two that I could use, one from each one's section of evidence, or one sentence of evidence from each one. And then what we can do is explain with at least one sentence um, how those are similar. Basically, we're going to be explaining how does that evidence that I used tie TIE with the idea that I'm going to share with you and the topic that was assigned. Okay. Then we would have a sentence of conclusion and reminder. A conclusion, another way to say conclusion is ending. And the cool thing about the C and the E, we're also talking about conventions editing and content revising, even though revising doesn't um, start with an E or a C, uh, content does. So that's what we'll be doing. And so it's possible that we might have a total before we even do it after our break. Let me show you me again. So we have our topic sentence, our topic, what we're being asked to write about. And basically it was how are the pants and jeans have similar histories, period. Then, however, they're similar. We can select a sentence or a section that we're going to use for the pants and one section for the jeans section, or one sentence. Again, it depends on your kid's ability level. Then you would try your best to explain that with one sentence. And hopefully there would be something that you would write towards the end. And so if we count here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If your kids only talk about the topic, but they don't talk about how that they're similar in their histories, at least in one way, then there's no clear central idea, controlling idea, or thesis. If we don't have an ending, it says for a 2 that the introduction and conclusion are at least present. And so one person might give me a 2 for an essay like this in organization development, but one person might only give me 1. So I would have a better chance of getting the 2 if they do see some sort of closure that brings everything. And if you look at me closely, I'm wearing a yellow shirt, yellow for evidence, underneath a green shirt, green for explaining, and the shirt is in my body. So why did I show you that? Well, that's what it might look like. Now, the last E or the C was conventions. And here's what I want to teach you, because this is what happens right now at the beginning of the year. If your students read S silently instead of S softly or L loudly, silence is deadly in a classroom of auditory learners. And so what's going to happen is it's possible that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences, but only one period. And so what I would want you to do is take away every monkey. And what I'll do for all of you who signed up, I'll be sending you a set of these monkeys because they're a very strong visual. I'll send them when the uh, folders and organizers are ready. I'll send them in the mail with these monkeys. You'll get quite a few little things inside your package, but the big thing will either be because I'm giving you the buy one get one free option. You can either get two reading and writing guides, two sets of graphic organizers if you already have a guide, uh, or one of each. Um, and so if you sign up another teacher, then you guys could both get elementary or both secondary. If you're signing up yourself, then you can get elementary and secondary because sometimes elementary teachers want to say, how do I help my kids who are a little bit more advanced? And so basically next Saturday, we'll be taking uh, a different passage and a different prompt, and we're going to try and get to another level. And I'm going to send this video, if you're watching this, it doesn't matter if you teach elementary or middle school. This is the basic structure they ask from all of us. They just ask a little bit more in terms of vocabulary, the word choices, the development, the quality, and the depth of the introduction, the head, and the shoes, the conclusion are going to be a little bit higher. All right, so before I let you go for a few minutes, I know we went probably over our 90-minute time already. Yes, we did. Want you to see the sheet that we'll be using after the break, the already finished one. But I did want to make sure that you saw what the students can make from scratch on test day. Here's what I made because of my understanding and reading all of the 5 bullets very carefully. It's your 3 things, IBC, introduction, body, conclusion, 4 sections, 4 folds. And if we can do all of these things, we'll get a 5 or more. It's informative, expository, the purpose, how the histories and sneakers are similar to one another. So our central idea statement are can be separated into 2 sentences. We can write 1 sentence about the topic if we need to. We can write another sentence about the idea. We can write 1 or 2 sentences or use 1 or 2 sections of evidence and hopefully at least explain with 1 sentence and have 1 sentence. And again, explaining is give me a who, a what, a when, a where, a why, a which, how, or a wow. And we won't worry about the wow. We're just going to be basically asking when I write out the evidence, we're going to see what W would be the best one that we could add that would help me understand why this evidence is relevant to the idea and the topic that we were assigned. Okay. And again, we have conclusion, as you see here, section 4, ending, either 1 sentence for to close the essay, 2 for ending, or 3 for conclusion. And the cool thing about that is your ending just present, then I could at least get a 2 for organization development. If it's effective, it's a conclusion, and it might be reflecting, making real world connections to that. And again, I want to make sure you understand that because we're not in this first video, this first part, trying to get scores of 7, 8, 9, or 10. We're just trying to get 5, 6, or 7. We're not going to be worrying about reflections. We're not going to be worried about the wow statement. So I'm going to pause the video, and this is where I would like you to pause it yourself too. Go ahead and go to the restroom, drink water. Where am I? Here I am. Drink water, go to the restroom, look through your notes. First of all, email me any questions that you have about uh, this first part of part A so far. Um, Go on to my Facebook and put something nice. Which idea did you really like a lot? Um, why did you like it? And go into a little bit of detail. And what's going to happen is people are going to respond. Uh, they're going to ask you questions, and if you don't know the answer, I will try to share my insight. There's always going to be some negative people, so if you happen to see somebody that put something derogatory or condescending or demeaning to you, don't worry. There's always going to be those kind of people. Just focus on the positive. Either you can delete the comment or I will myself. But hopefully you'll get some likes or some hearts. And again, by the end of next week, uh, by Friday evening, whichever person has the most likes, hearts, comments, questions, you will be winning that magical extrinsic motivation of a $25 gift card. So I'm going to pause to give you some time to reflect, and I'll come back in a bit. Okay, so we're back for our how to plan and write the response. And before I get into it, I want to make sure that we understand something very clearly. There is no one way or the highway, one cookie cutter approach that is going to help your students. The results were poor across the state. Reminder, third grade alone had 52% quadruple zeros, 84% total scores of 0 through 5. So I want to make sure I show you with that 3 in 4, 3 things, IBC, in 4 sections to get 5 or more points on ECR. Okay. So when you're planning, TEA could care less what approach you use, what acronym you use, what graphic organizer. Your students are allowed to make their own essay graphic organizer. You saw how easy it was for me to just follow the 5 bullets to write out this. What better way to make sure that they can at least get a 4, 5, 6, or 7 by following this simple plan that's strictly aligned to TEA. So I do want to show you why I'm sharing that before we leave the prompt page. It does say to review the selection. We've already done that. We've already highlighted the evidence that's relatable and related to each other in terms of similar. The planning the response basically means what's the brainstorming process that you're going to be doing? What is the outline that you're planning on using? So I want to show you if you were to use my training you how to use my train, the writing purpose, The reading genre was two articles. The writing purpose was informative expository. The W that's being asked was how what, that pants and jeans have a history that is similar to one another. The engine being the introduction, the green and the blue car being the body, and the caboose being the conclusion and the conventions. Okay. For the sake of this part one, we are not going to worry about having a hook, any attention getter, a whistle or a lead, a wow. We don't really need to worry about that. All we want to make sure is that we respond to the topic in a sentence, have an idea in a separate sentence, and when the kids get better, you can teach them how to converge those two together. We're going to hopefully find some evidence about the sneakers. Where is the evidence? The location and the quotation. Where is the evidence about the pants? And hopefully we'll be able to at least explain that with one sentence and then have one sentence to close the essay and wrap it all up. And notice that between each train, there's the word transition. Um, if this was turned up and down, that could be a human body. So some people organize from top to bottom, some people organize left to right. It doesn't matter as long as you have all the components that they're asking for. We don't need to worry about exploding, I'm sorry. We're just going to try and explain with one sentence. That's going to be our goal so that these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences with 6 ending punctuations will get us hopefully a score of 5, 6, or 7 with the subjective graders. Okay. Taking these off and saying, well, Bill, you gave us these reading and writing guide. How will that work? This is, well, you will first have to understand which kind of prompt it is, that something is similar to something. How are pants and jeans similar in the way that they were historically in terms of inventions and being used now? Okay, so we would need to make sure that we respond to the topic by either restating, rephrasing, or reflecting. We'll have an idea, all that being in the introduction. No, no wow, no hook, no lead. We would try to have, and the cool thing about why you choose your idea is there's what's my evidence for pants, what's my evidence for the shoes, and those would be in the essay. I'll be showing you how to write the location and how to use quotations so that we can clearly define the difference. We're going to try to just explain with one sentence using a who, what, when, where, why, which, or how. And we will probably try to, since we already will have written our restating up here, we'll try to at least rephrase in some way down here the topic and the idea that we chose. And then you'll see what will be a rough draft and hopefully a finished product. There's another way I'm going to show you how to do this in our second 3 hours that I hope that you'll find helpful. If you're watching this is October, um, the can't remember. I think it's the first week of October, so the 4th, I believe. Just guessing. Um, for those of you who are purchasing this at any time, you'll be getting the 3-hour sessions back to back. If you purchase them later in October, and you'll be getting the other 6 hours in November. And if anybody who purchases the elementary or secondary, you'll be getting them uh, all at the same time in 4 different links, whatever, it just depends on whenever you do it. I just try to work on the process over time. So here we go. Let me get us to the point where we can have the structure to do fairly well in a extended constructed response that uses I'm going to use like this right here. And I could use the rubric organizer that we came up with together, but so that you can see for a little while, it might be better to teach your students to use the one that's pre-written for them. That way they only have to plug in the prompt and the purpose. Okay, so if you think of palm, my hand, this will be later on this afternoon. Palm, we have a purpose, prompt, and once we know the purpose and prompt, and we will need to plan. And we're just going to happen because we write from top to bottom. We're going to go ahead and use this rubric organizer. So what is our topic? So we don't include the idea first. Our idea is how. So we'll put that in our second sentence. So we'll start with this word right here, capital. And if I don't say capital, many students are not going to push the shift button and capitalize the letters. Okay. Capital the histories. History singular is with a Y. So whenever you change history singular to histories plural, you drop the Y and add IES. The histories of sneakers and pants. And you might want to tell your kids to try and write neatly, on the hand, the graphic organizer that had the hand. I just want to remind you, Iron Man has his hands spread apart, his fingers. And so that would be print letters, whether they're being um, written by hand with a pen or a pencil or typed on a computer, no letters will touch. Cursive is fine if you're going to teach the kids to use paper still, but just remind them to focus on their penmanship, print, cursive, keyboarding, and letters. Don't forget when to push shift. Okay. So here's a cool thing about the hand. All right. If you have, I'm going to be writing some sentences. A sentence should start with a capital, the first word. It should have subject verb agreement called usage. And then it should have a punctuation. Okay. Now, if all these words between each uh, word, we should push the space bar one time, and we'll have an ending punctuation called an exclamation, a period, or a question mark. And so that would be the end of a sentence, singular cup. And the cool thing is, before I can start a new sentence, we would think of this. I would push the space bar once if I'm still on the same sentence. If I'm only slowing the sentence down, then I would push the space bar once if I'm using a yellow punctuation, or I'll push the space bar a second time if I'm ending the sentence and then starting a new sentence. And I know there's lots of different keyboarding rules, but I just feel like if I'm only putting one space all the time between words and sentences, it gets a little harder for the reader to tell when one sentence stops and another one begins. Okay, so teach your kids to write neatly. I call it turning in art, not fart. A masterpiece, not a mess. Okay. The history of sneakers and pants, and all I'm doing is restating exactly, and that's perfectly fine at the beginning, are similar to, I almost put another, and my brain caught me because I'm trying to transcribe. So if the prompt is here to my left, I'm just going to use the other prompt. Make sure your kids have the prompt and their box lined up side by side so that they can restate or rephrase carefully to one another. Okay, what they want to know is how. And I told you that as soon as you, on that prompt page, it was critical that you remember this. So I'm going to take a second look at it. The way the prompt pages are set up, apologize for the delay. The way the prompt pages are set up, it's going to go from the prompt, also known as the topic, the T, to the evidence, the E, then your answer, which is your idea, and you can use restating, rephrasing, or reflecting in some creative way, depending on what kind of ability. So teach your students to memorize this, because we don't want to restate the prompt and then come straight down to the answer, or else we'll have an idea that doesn't even make sense. Okay. So the next step is, what did I decide using for the evidence? Well, we learned that in the sneakers passage, something that was similar to something from the pants passage was that they both had a problem that someone was able to find a solution for. Okay, so I'm going to write this, and I'm going to write this in my evidence. And Um, they and I don't need the evidence. I just need what's the idea that I'm going to use that they both had a problem that needed to be solved. How are they similar? I already know that we're talking about pants and sneakers. They both, what I did was look up so I don't have to repeat myself. I don't have to say the pants and sneakers, that's repeating. I don't need to do that. Had a problem that needed a solution. Oops. Now, this is the idea that's coming from the student's head. So if your kids don't have a how, that's probably why there were so many zeros. They were trying to talk about the topic T without the W that was being asked, the how, period. So two sentences. All right. And I'll try my best. There's not a lot of space in here, and many kids who struggle with writing also struggle with writing too big. So let's give the location. Um, in the sneaker passage, they're both in paragraph one, the solution, problem, and the solution. The problem and solution in the pants paragraph is in paragraph 1 and 2. So here's how we can save some space. I'm going to give the location in paragraph 1 of, we're going to write down the names of the titles, Sneaker Nation, Jeans Take Over, of Sneaker Nation. That's the location. The author, whoever wrote this thing, states. Okay. Now, in the same way that your kids have dialogue when they're quoting somebody who's speaking, similar rules are followed when you're quoting evidence. K, k, comma, k, k, quotation, and k, capital. So I'll be transcribing, I'll make sure that the evidence is side by side so that I don't make a lot of conventions mistakes. And a lot of times kids are careless. Make sure they put capital because it's a title. It's not, it's the title, the topic of the first article. The author states capital. Dirt running tracks. Dirt running tracks. And I'm reading it out loud so I can remember in my brain. Across the country, were being replaced with rubber ones. And I think sometimes what happens, instead of explaining the evidence, and why is this a problem? Because they said that the cleats, the metal cleats, were messing up the they were ruining the rubber tracks. Okay. The metal, I'm going to try and say it as much as closely as possible. The metal, and even though I didn't put that in there, as I'm reading through it, I want to make sure that I'm clearly stating the problem. The metal cleats this is all in paragraph 1, so I don't need to change the location. Very next sentence. The spikes would ruin the new rubber tracks. The metal cleats had spikes that would ruin the rubber tracks. Okay. Now, it does say on the rubric, if your students only give evidence from one, then they would be okay. But I'm at least going to address the problem that they were having with the pair of pants. And the reminder of the problem was they kept ripping their pants while they were, you know, working, going through, digging through the ground and through the streams, looking for that gold. Okay. In the, try to give you the right name. Genes take over passage. Take over capitals. It tells us, and so just coming up with lots of different ways to relay information. K, k, comma, k, k, quotation. Let me see if I ended up. I started there. Rubber ones, the metal ones would run. Okay, so we have k, k, closing the sentence is stopping, and a k, k, quotation. because I'm not quoting any more evidence. In the genes takeover passage, it tells us comma quotation capital. What did it tell us? That men looking for gold for gold would most important problem keep ripping their pants. Keep ripping their pants. I appreciate you guys bearing with me while I write this out, because I just want you to see, like, in my understanding, the rubric states we only need to have evidence from one passage. But because all of the ones that got threes in organization development had evidence from both passages, I want to make sure that we at least make an attempt to try that. Okay. They kept ripping their pants. Probably in streams and while digging holes. Okay. So that was a problem and a problem. And of course, two men invented. So I'm just gonna write here a little bit more. I'm going to be paraphrasing the evidence now as I'm transitioning to a one sentence explanation. One man named Bill Bowerman here came up with, and well, when I was thinking about how to do this, I was thinking you could either just stick with evidence, explain, like on the train idea, evidence, explain just with the shoes, and then this one here, this green here could be evidence explained just with the pants if you want to organize it that way. But as long as you have the information for both, we want to talk about the problem and then we want to talk about the solution. That's a different way to do it. Came up with an whoops and an idea while making waffles. About making sneakers with the bumpy patterns. Now, please understand, even though I'm writing this in the explaining part, you can't explain evidence with evidence. So what I'm trying to do is write down the problem and the solution because they both had a problem and a solution. So I'm going to write just that one idea. Um, Again, I chose that because it's towards the beginning of both selections, both articles about making sneakers with bumpy patterns that wouldn't damage the track. Yeah, transitioning over for the jeans article. A guy named Jacob Davis made pants with a durable fabric with pins called rivets. Rivets. That solved the tearing problem. Okay. So unfortunately, all this evidence is great. I was just kind of summarizing here, paraphrasing, all right? But we haven't explained. So I told you we need one sentence of explanation and explaining. And if you look at this here, if this is my topic and my idea, this is my evidence for Speaker Nation. This is my evidence for Sneaker Nation. This is my evidence for Genes Take Over. Here's how you need to think of it. The idea is coming from the student's head. Basically, reading is to infer, rubbing my fur, and writing is to explain to, reading is to, inferring is to read between the lines, and typing and explaining is to write or type between the lines. And so the lines were the prompt, the topic, the idea that your students add, is what's going to fill in the gap and make understanding. If my first piece of evidence is the problem and the solution for the sneakers, and my second one happens to be the problem and the solution for the pants, then explaining it with one sentence would be, again, typing between the lines. What does that mean? So I would want to start with just one sentence. So all I need is something. How did they both help? Why were those good ideas? Where did they make some impact? When was this going to become an issue that was not bad anymore? What will be happening differently because of it? Who is this going to help? So I will come up with a compound sentence that tells one good benefit. Why do I think that the jeans idea is going to be great? The new jeans could, and again, I need an idea from my head, probably be worn. That's the what. How long? Probably all week without tearing. So that's me trying to explain that, comma, and did I change the order? Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, it's probably a better idea if you're going to talk about um, sneaker pants in evidence. You probably want sneaker pants in the way that you explain it. So um, I would just flip that in the final copy. I would say to the student, you know what, since you mentioned uh, the sneakers first in your evidence, go ahead and mention sneakers first in your solution. So just a reminder, if I was doing this on here, I would talk about the evidence from the sneaker here on this left-hand side, the solution, and the evidence from the pants on this side and its solution. And then I would have either one sentence explaining each one or one sentence combined to explain both of them. How did this help them? Uh, why did it become such a great solution? So, and then we're going to have to talk about out of order. We'll have to talk about um, the sneakers now. Runners could go fast without slipping. And some of my students would ask me, Mr. McDonald, since I gave you an independent clause, the new jeans could probably be worn all week without tearing. And then another independent clause, runners could go fast without slipping. because their shoes were not digging in and getting stuck and probably falling. Um, my students would ask me if they could get two monkeys because I would help them check the quantity of sentences. And so if they did everything correctly with the capitalization, the comma, one of the fanboys, if you've been teaching that, and then the second independent clause, you could give extra credit for that. So um, because of us talking about the problem and the solution for both, that's an extra couple of sentences. But since they both had a problem, if your struggling kids only talked about the problem, from each one, then they could have a sentence talking about why is that in their own words, who is that going to hurt? What is it? What could go wrong besides what they already told us in the passage? When is there going to be an issue? Where are they going to be using pants or shoes in the future that will create uh, a dilemma for them? How uh, will this affect if nothing ever changes? Because I don't need to give the solution. I'm just trying to share with you, like, if the kids only give the problem, they both had a problem. So that was similar. If they only give the solution, that's fine because that's both similar. And then you could explain with one sentence. Okay. So because we're on our last sentence, we want to restate if we need to for the struggling kids and rephrase if we can. So the most popular conclusions are capital in conclusion. And if you look at my transition words and phrases inside your Dear Doc reading and writing guide, you'll see 2 pages of transition words and phrases, and there's 20 or 25 that are just endings to essays that you can have different, what I call socks. If this is my head, my shirt, my pants, then the conclusion could be the transition would be my socks, and the conclusion my shoes. In conclusion, or that's why are the two most common transitional phrases to move to the body. So we're not whiplashing the reader. Whiplashing the reader is like, I'm enjoying your essay and all of a sudden you're making me jump to something else, kind of like beam me up, Scotty. I don't even know how I got there, right? So we're going to try and uh, rephrase slightly. So that, in conclusion, or that's why both the, and so we'll go back to talking about it in the right order. Um, choose in the first article and pants in the second one. says here they both had a problem that need a solution. Had, whoops, had, and again, this is my rough draft, so I can make mistakes. Had things that weren't working well, but were fixed. And again, because we have to teach to all learning styles. So that's why both, that's what I mean in conclusion. That's uh, how both the pants, both the sneakers and the pants had a problem that needed a solution. So that would be the restating. And then sometimes just even changing one word. And so I'm just going to close by sharing this with you. Wow can be just what one word can I change so that I don't have repetition. That's why both articles had an issue that needed a solution. That's why both articles had a problem that needed to be fixed. So what I did there was I only changed one word and I kept everything else the same. So rephrasing can be as little as one word and it will make it sound slightly different. Then, of course, you would go back to the editing and revising room. And the last thing that you would do on the final copy when you transfer this over, um, you could some people don't make their kids explain in their rough draft, or they don't add their little hooks. They do that when they're writing their final copy, like things just speed up the process. Um, that's kind of up to you guys. But um, if it's possible, the kids were typing this on the actual lines as their rough draft, then they would need to be learning how to push backspace and saying, okay, let me look for capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling, or sentence boundary errors, or let me look at content that has some issues. What do I need to add, remove, replace, or move? And we already talked about how if you're going to write about things in a certain order, keep them organized. And so you have to kind of decide, is it better to talk about the evidence, the solution, and the explanation for one, the evidence, solution, and explanation for the second one? Or do you want to do evidence for both, like I did here, solution and transition for both here, and I'll send to the explanation. So this paper would probably get, I would imagine, 2 points because as a reminder, explaining is typing between the lines. This part right here came from the student's head, and this part right here, um, the new jeans could probably be worn. Could go really fast without slipping or breaking the track. And so readings came from the kids' heads. And then because we were rephrasing, we were using kind of different words, then you could give uh, credit. So those are the ideas that are um, from your student's head. So it's not just restating, uh, repeating everything from the prompt page or the uh, the evidence. Because what you can do is get a yellow highlighter, and if you highlight every single thing that is from the selection, and then you find that there's absolutely nothing left. This is all paraphrased, except for that. Then whatever is left didn't come from the passage, the articles, or from the prompt page. They came from your student's head. So that's one way to kind of tell. Um, you can't have all yellow because it would be all evidence. You can't have all green because it means there was nothing at all used from the selection to support your ideas. So there has to be a nice balance of evidence being explained. So there you have it, folks. Switch back to say goodbye. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We spent a good amount of time, probably a good 3 hours on part one. I will be letting you reflect on those things. Let me know your thoughts. I would like for some of you to write down like maybe your own little rough draft, and maybe don't get so complex. Keep it as simple as possible. Maybe write one piece of evidence, maybe just the problem or just the solution with the sneakers, just the problem or just the solution with the pants, and then only one sentence about the who, what, when, why, who, what, when is that solution being fixed going to be helping, why, who, what, when, where, why, explaining how the pants being fixed is going to help. And then on the conclusion, try your best to rephrase. And so you might have two less sentences if you only try to focus on the problem or the solution, because they were both something that the selections had in common. All right. So be sure to take a moment if you get a chance to let me know what you felt like was helpful in how to make sure we can get kids to follow that basic structure straight from the prompt page to be able to have uh, enough content, enough quantity slash quality to get hopefully at least a 4. Because even this, guys, even if I have a simple central idea statement with the topic and the idea combined, I have one piece of evidence, I explain it with my own words, and I have an ending that's only 4 sentences, but 4 sentences is better than nothing. As long as these all tie together, there's the topic, my idea, my evidence, the explanation, and the ending. T, I, E, E, E. Everything in a passage must tie together. So you can have a day where kids all bring ties, like from their parents, they can borrow some ties, or you can um, ask your kids to bring different shoes, because the shoes are going to be kind of like the ending. As a reminder, the graphic organizer here He has some shoes at the end with laces. How do you tie everything together? Um, Reminding you that the T is the topic, the idea, the evidence from the text, one or more. That's all we need. Explain, explain, not worrying about exploding, but we do need to end the essay and then take it to the editing and revising room. Thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to hearing some feedback from you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and take your time. Don't watch the other one till you have more energy. Uh, Renew your mind, renew your strength. Watch it at your pace, and each time give me, after the 90-minute, give me some ideas on what you liked, what you want to adopt and make yours. I don't charge an adoption fee. Um, Appreciate you taking the time. I know that spending time watching a video is time consuming of your free time. So that's one of the things, instead of being stuck with me in a room for 6 hours or 12 hours, as the case is going to be, you can watch these total of 12 hours, 6 for element, sorry, 24 hours, 12 for elementary and 12 for middle school on both purposes of writing. You can take them and watch them 1 hour at a time, or whatever your time frame, your time allotment allows. Just write down. When you give feedback, if you did draw some pictures or write out something, feel free to, when you post it to the Facebook group, go ahead and include a picture, because a picture paints 1,000 words. Okay. We don't want you to have 1,000 words and then be trying to paint a picture. If you can show a picture of your finished product, or you holding some monkeys, or one of the sheets that we did. That way teachers who are not part of it can see the value that it has. And so look forward to hearing from some of you. You have a blessed rest of your day.